This lesson aims to help you when doing transient analyses to realistically model storages and discharge arrangements at the remote end of a system. I've lost count of the number of times I've seen a pipeline model with a reservoir or tank simply placed on the node at the end of a pipeline. The user will have given the storage a realistic cross-sectional area and a realistic initial water level, mostly because these are parameters that are necessary to create accurate real-time or steady-state hydraulic results. This modelling approach assumes that fluid can freely flow into and back out from the storage. The actual ability for reverse flow to occur during transient events may not exist in some terminal discharge arrangements. It is all too convenient to just drop a reservoir onto the receiving end of a pumping pipeline model, particularly when the project team's objective is to deliver the pumping station and pipeline, not an existing sewer manhole or an existing water tank. Consequently, this lesson presents better approaches to modelling the discharge point on some pipelines, with consideration of the physical pipe arrangement at the discharge point forming the basis for the improved models. When the inlet pipe is submerged, unless there is a non-return valve installed on the inlet pipe, flow in the storage is always accessible for discharge back into the pipeline during transients. Here we are looking at a submerged inlet pipe feeding a water tank. During stable inflow with the pump on, water flow enters the tank. A submerged inlet like this one is often used to promote circulation and mixing within the tank. In this configuration, the fluid stored in the tank can flow back into the pipeline during the unstable flow conditions created by a transient pump stop event. The submerged inlet into a tank like this one is easy to understand. How about another common form of fluid storage with a submerged inlet pipe? The approach to modelling a submerged inlet may not always be so simple. Here we are looking at a large pond excavated into the natural ground within enclosing earth embankments. It is sealed with a high-density polyethylene liner. The inlet pipeline is designed to come up and over the embankment to avoid the pipe having to penetrate the polyethylene liner. In this example, the inflow is discharged through a submerged structure. During transient events, and even at the initial steady state before a transient event, whether all of this inlet pipeline remains submerged is governed by three things: elevation of the pipeline's crest over the embankment relative to the fluid level in the storage, whether an air valve is installed on the pipeline at the crest over the embankment, and if there is no air valve at the crest, the potential for air to collect at this point. If the crest is more than 10 meters above the current fluid level, a siphon cannot be sustained over the pond's embankment. If an air valve is present at the crest, a siphon will not form over the pond's embankment. If a large air pocket forms at the crest, in the absence of an air valve, the fluid column will break over the crest. In each of these three situations, a section of the pipeline will not be submerged, invalidating a transient model that relies on submergence and backflow from the fluid storage. In these cases, a top inlet model becomes more appropriate. When the inlet pipe is an over-the-top arrangement, over a tank's concrete wall or over a reservoir's earth embankment, it is possible for the water column to break at the crest of the inlet pipe. Alternatively, as seen in this photograph, the inlet pipe into this tank can be configured to create a deliberate air gap between the inlet pipe and fluid in the tank. Returning to the earth embankment pond, in this top inlet design, an air valve exists at the pipeline crest over the embankment. Under some flow conditions, the air valve may be closed and the pipe will act as a pressure main all the way to the submerged inflow structure in the pond. Under other steady state or transient hydraulic conditions, the air valve may open to admit air. When this happens, the pressurized pipeline system in essence ends at the pipe crest. The remaining section of the pipe will operate under gravity flow, potentially as a partially full pipe. When either of these cases occur, fluid in the storage can't be discharged back into the pipeline during transients. In these cases, a more detailed model is necessary. For most top inlet arrangements, an air valve should be added to the model, plus a realistic vertical pipe profile for the storage's inlet pipe work. The recommended top inlet model consists of 3 elements. 1. A tank. Its sole purpose is to define the initial steady-state fluid level. A level slightly above the pipe obvert, for example at the crest over the embankment, is a reasonable approximation of the crest acting as a weir. Users can set the tank cross-sectional area to be a realistic value or a small value, depending on how finely they want to simulate transient inflows. 2. A non-return valve, to ensure that any fluid stored in the tank is not able to flow back into the pipeline during transient simulation. 3. An air valve on the upstream side of the non-return valve. The pipe is assumed to contain no air at the crest before the transient event, so the initial air volume in the model can be set to 0. Users have the ability to model this air valve with unconstrained airflow, air discharge, or add devices below the air valve to simulate an air valve of a specific size, which will have constrained airflow, air discharge characteristics. Another common pipeline discharge arrangement is a sewer pressure main terminating at a gravity sewer access chamber. In this case, while the pump is on and stable flow exists from the pressure main, there will be minimal discharge head in the access chamber. That is, the outlet gravity sewer pipe may keep the fluid level quite low in the chamber. If that is not the true situation, the project team can simply specify an appropriate discharge head. While the pump is off and unstable transient flow is present in the pressure main, a reasonable and conservative design assumption is to assume there will be negligible discharge head at the access chamber. If the gravity outlet sewer has emptied the chamber, the ability for the chamber to supply fluid back into the pressure main will be negligible or non-existent. The recommended sewer access chamber model consists of 3 elements. A tank. Again, its sole purpose is to define the initial steady-state fluid level. A level slightly above the pipe obvert is suitable. A small tank cross-sectional area can be used, representing the actual dimensions of the chamber. 2. A non-return valve, to ensure that any fluid stored in the chamber is not able to flow back into the pipeline during transient simulation. This device is there to ensure we analyse the worst, the conservative possibility. 3. An air cushion on the upstream side of the non-return valve. A WATHAM air cushion is a modelling device that can draw in air if it needs to, plus it can compress or decompress the air inside the cushion. The cushion is given the actual chamber's cross-sectional area. The cushion's initial air volume is set to be the actual capacity of the chamber minus any initial fluid volume. This graph reveals that this model allows flow into the chamber to progressively drop to 0 after pump power failure. No backflow occurs into the pressure main. The air volume in the air cushion, the access chamber, increases marginally due to the drop of fluid volume and fluid head in the chamber. Now looking at the head, at the point of entry into the access chamber, we can see head drop slightly. Note it remains positive, indicating that at no time during this simulation did the air cushion device draw additional air into the system. indicating that this model is well suited to representing a sealed, gas-tight sewer access chamber. Let me finish this lesson by describing how the WATHAM software handles any fluid storage during transient simulation, depending on the storage cross-sectional area. Users will notice some storage devices are handled differently between real-time steady-state analyses and subsequent transient analyses. A water storage with a cross-sectional area of 5,000 square metres or more will be modelled as a reservoir in transient simulations. A transient reservoir tracks the flow of water discharged into and out of the system. However, the fluid level in the reservoir stays fixed. As a result, the transient head at this point in the system remains absolutely fixed. The underlying concept being that very large water storages are not likely to change level to any significant degree during transient events lasting only a few minutes. A water storage with a cross-sectional area between 3 square metres and 5,000 square metres will be modelled as a surge tank in transient simulations. A surge tank tracks the flow of fluid discharged into and out of the system, allows the fluid level to rise and fall in the tank, plus the tank can overflow. Using a surge tank is appropriate when it is important to consider variation in water level, or head, at the terminal end of the system. A water storage with a cross-sectional area less than 3 square metres has a diameter of 2 metres or less. As a result, its transient behaviour will be closer to a vertical pipe than a fluid storage. These cases will be modelled as a standpipe in transient simulations. A standpipe tracks the flow of fluid discharged into and out of the system, allows the fluid level to rise and fall in the standpipe. In addition, it allows for wall friction in the standpipe, plus the standpipe can overflow. A standpipe has the added function of allowing air to enter the pipe system if the standpipe empties. Thanks for watching. Now please take a few moments to consolidate the key messages and review what you have learnt in this lesson.